So far from the Christian and Muslim God who made everything, including the laws, the Greeks said, well, there's nature, and then inside of that there's gods, and gods do everything. A bit contradictory, but they're the best contradictory people you've ever met. The divine world thus was a meaningful, orderly structure within which men felt free to work and to create, and the cult of the great Olympian gods in Homer had a rational cast from which superstition and magic had largely been stripped. In Homer, the men who fill the earthly plane are not consciously visualized as self-moving, nor as true individuals. They're a little bit cardboard background bit. Odysseus, Achilles, Agamemnon, and the other heroes are more types than individuals, an idealistic attitude which remained powerful in Greek philosophy of later days. Yet, the view of mankind which Homer expressed is a landmark in the progress of civilization. To understand the significance of the Iliad in this respect, one can do no better than compare it with the greatest epic of Mesopotamian literature, the Tale of Gilgamesh. There are many similarities, but the differences are equally sharp. He goes on to compare them at great length. We skip again several pages. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh, I used to have a copy. I had a source book of just ancient writings, but it never made it from Connecticut. Just didn't make the shipping. I have quite a few books, never made it. Anyways, I had the Epic of Gilgamesh. Unastounding. I read it because it was interesting to see an earlier version of the flood and some different references that ended up in the Bible and stuff. But it's not like the Greek epics, which I have to admit are very dry unless you're very motivated. The Greek world, again, knew how to write before 700 BC. At some point in the 8th century, Greek visitors to the eastern Mediterranean became acquainted with the Phoenician alphabet, decided that it had utility, and adapted the script for their own language. In doing so, they invented some new letters and systematically employed signs for the vowels, more important in Greek than in Semitic tongues. Thus, the Greek alphabet was a supple tool capable of settling down all types of thought precisely and clearly. As in the case of the Greek dialects, so in the alphabet there appeared many local varieties. The one which eventually won out was basically the Attic form with some Ionic influence. Well before 700 BC, the Greek alphabet was being borrowed by peoples in Asia Minor and was taken over by the Etruscans in Italy, who passed it to the Romans. When and how the great epics were written down, we do not know. But once this step had occurred, they could circulate easily over the whole Greek world as a source for artists, as a stimulus to poets, and as a powerful statement of Greek views on man and the gods. The spreading of the Greek epics was important. By 750 BC, the Aegean basin was again resuming contacts with the outside world. From the Near East it borrowed the alphabet, motifs in pottery, a few mythical tales. The ivory which now began to appear in Greek graves was of Eastern origin. Traders, as we shall see in the next chapter, were moving both eastward and also into the Western Mediterranean. The population of the Greek world seems to have been expanding at a rapid rate, and the consolidation of local political and social institutions had proceeded so far that Greece was ready to colonize widely abroad from its Aegean base. This is going to be a very interesting bit we'll get to in a bit here. This is colonization, the methodical nature of it. Even more important, the basic qualities of the Greek outlook had also become set. Anyone who reads the Iliad, or who sympathetically considers the masterpieces of Dipylon pottery, can easily infer that Greek civilization was already capable of tremendous achievements. In these works, the hallmarks of the Greek genius, disciplined order, concentration, logical analysis, and confidence, to name no others, are incarnated in dynamic form. So impressive indeed are the first fruits of Greek civilization that we are too likely to forget how dull an era had been most of the Dark Ages. Even in 750, Greek life was still extremely primitive. Greek culture, architecture, and philosophy were yet to begin. The Hellenic views about the nature of man and the world were still to be developed. Only the basic guidelines for Greek civilization had thus far been set. And we are there at the end of chapter 9. Next, continuing chapter 10, page 205. The century following 750 was one of the most fruitful in all of Greek history. Now I'll remind you that Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates were around the 300 BC. Just put them around 300, 350, 400 BC. And it says 750 to 650 BC was one of the most fruitful in all of Greek history. The main qualities of the Hellenic outlook had already emerged. Now they became much more clearly defined, and the scope of Greek culture greatly enlarged. Skipping down to the next paragraph. Politically, the period witnessed the rise of the Greek city-state, a form of government which expressed a noble set of political values still fundamental today. Now the city-state, or the polis, another word we'll hear for it in a moment here, is a Greek concept, isn't it? And we are going to get a pretty good in-depth view of its history and what exactly it is. Now, as always, this is very, very highly edited. A bit of mumbo-jumbo interspersed here and there, and you have to just sort of clip that out. And it's been done painstakingly. So, let us go forward. An interesting history of the city-state. Politically, the period witnessed the rise of the Greek city-state, a form of government which expressed a noble set of political values still fundamental today. On the one hand, the political and military strengths inherent in this organization permitted the Greeks to expand abroad widely. It permitted the colonization we're going to take a detailed look at later. It permitted the fact that they could hold off invaders and defend their freedom century after century. But, on the other hand, quote, local patriotism and mutual suspicion divided the homeland into a host of tiny, absolutely sovereign units. While these states were bound together by a common culture and could occasionally cooperate against an outside army, they couldn't always cooperate when they were invaded. Sometimes when they were invaded, some of the city-states allied with the invaders. Okay, that's like Illinois and Georgia and Maine ally with Nazi Germany when Nazi Germany tries to invade New York City. So occasionally they could cooperate, sometimes they couldn't though. Their continuing rivalry eventually was to destroy Greek freedom. Socially, the power of ancestral groupings diminished enough to allow a significant, though limited, assertion of individuality and the consolidation of a truly aristocratic outlook, which stamped all of later Greek life. Now I just want to make a quick note here. He doesn't go over painstakingly the psychological fact, but just imagine if this culture has developed to a point where it doesn't allow just arbitrary power. It's come to its senses. This culture has come to its senses. It says, you know what? You will not just arrogate yourself power over our people. They rebel. They rebel constantly. We'll see that later, I'm sure. If not in this book, then in other texts. They were prone to rebellion, the Greeks, because they wouldn't take it. Damn it to hell. They would not take rulers over them. Kings became unfashionable. They said of the Persians, we don't kowtow to our rulers the way the Persians do. No way the Greeks do not bow down to a ruler. Greeks are free men. Greeks are the slaves of no man, said Pliny, I believe, or somebody. It's not true. Even Plato was sold into slavery. But that was their attitude. That was their outlook on life. They had to have an upper class.